Okay, I quit. There I go. Come on, move. There we go. We'll get there eventually. There we go. Giving. That's where we're at. Giving. So once again, when you start this conversation, I have pretty strong feelings about this particular topic. But when you start this conversation, once again, you got to think, what is your authority? Well, how do we look at the Bible? We get right back into all this restoration history and all we talked about, doctrine, and, can we go beyond what God says? Do we need to do what God says? If the Bible says, doesn't specifically say we can't do it, can we do it anyway? Giving has a lot to do with philosophy. The church of our century is not the church of the first century, number one. It's hard to make a comparison. They didn't have things that we have. They didn't have business. They didn't have buses. They didn't have insurance. They didn't have a lot of the things we have. Most churches were house churches. Most of them met in synagogues. So if you really look at first century giving, most of it had to do with supporting brethren in need, supporting other brethren in need, other congregations, other locations. Paul spent a lot of time on that in Corinthians, right? Getting the money to go back to Judea because of the famine in Judea. Collecting that money, carrying it back because the brethren in Judea needed it. That was a big thing for Paul for a lot of reasons. I think one thing is he wanted the Jews to receive that gift from the Gentiles. I think that was a really big thing for Paul to have that happen. And we'll talk some about that. But if you really look at New Testament theology on giving, like I say, it's not, some ways not comparable, but on the other hand, they did collect money. They did get money. The people who preached, people who apparently elders, other people were paid. People supported them, whether their own means or some other means. Things happened. They were supported. So the question comes, how do we do it, and how should we do it, and how much should we do? And there's a lot of questions when it comes to giving, and it's not something that I spend much time talking about. It's not something I very seldom preach sermons about, and it's something I was raised with. I was raised in churches where giving was almost a every Sunday topic, and it really irritated me, and it's one reason I don't do that. I'm not comfortable with that. I think giving in the church is our job, those of us who are members here, not other people, and I don't think and I think that's our biblical example, and we'll look at that a little bit, and I just think we have to be careful as a church, as an assembly, as to how we handle money and how we raise money and the things that we're involved with. I have very strong feelings about most of this. Some of you might not agree with me, but anyway, I'll throw it out there anyway. Peter answered, we've left everything to follow you. What will there be for us? And Jesus said to them, truly I tell you, at the renewal of all things, when the Son of Man sits on his glorious throne, you who have followed me will also sit on 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. And everyone who has left house or brothers or sisters or father or mother or wife or children or fields for my sake will receive 100 times as much and will inherit eternal life. It's kind of a weird place to start a lesson on giving, but Jesus was basically saying that whatever we give to the kingdom, we're going to get returned abundantly. Bobby Thompson, I loved Bobby to death. Those of you that still remember Bobby being here, and Bobby used to do the announcements all the time, and Bobby would always, every time we talk about giving, I always remember, because Bobby'd always sit, he'd raise his hand and he'd say, I've never given anything to the church that I missed. I know what he means by that. Everything that he gave, he received. But on the other hand, I think we should kind of miss it. I think God requires us to give, that we do sacrifice. Our giving is a sacrifice that we make. And it's something that we know will get returned. God's going to take care of us. He says that over and over and over. He's going to take care of us. He's going to provide for us. When I first started going to church, and me and Susie did, years ago. I think we're like a lot of people, young people and people that, we would, when the plate was passed, we'd be scrambling to try to see how much money we had, to put in the plate. And now, of course, and we shouldn't be that way. Giving should be purposeful. It should be something we purpose in our heart to do. It should be something we plan on doing. We should know how much we're going to give before we get here on a Sunday. It should be purposed. We should understand that. It should be something that we do. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it would be easier sometimes if it was, we'll get into that, but if it was a set amount, it would be easier. So, who is first? I always ask that question. I think if you look at your giving, what you give financially, monetarily, time, there's a lot of ways we give to the church, not just money, obviously. We give energy, we give time, we give our thoughts, we give our study, we give prayer. There's a lot of different things that we do. And, I think it's important sometimes we back up and ask ourselves, is there a place where Christ is first in our lives? And I think that's a really tough question sometimes. I know oftentimes I think, well, what has the church done for me? Well, I could never pay back what the church has done for me. That's not possible for me to ever do that. What they've done for my children, what they've done for my wife, our marriage, what the church has done for me is irreplaceable. And I couldn't pay that back. But sometimes when I'm thinking about giving, I really stop and look and I think, am I spending more money going out to eat than I am giving to the church? Am I spending more money on a car payment than I'm giving to the church? Is the church more important to me than a car payment? I can't tell you what to give. All I can do is tell you the thoughts that go through Rex's mind. That's all I can do, And when I sat down and look at that and I'm like, well, Clyde told me he was a banker for years, forever. Clyde was a banker a long time, and he said only one time, I think he said, did somebody come in and show their budget, and giving was on their budget, That should be, right? I mean, it should be a line item in our budget. It should be something that we think, how much am I giving? How does it compare to what I'm spending on other things in my life, How does God compare with what I'm spending on other things in my life? I think it's a valid question as a Christian that we should ask. Like Brent says, 10%. We'll turn and talk about the 10%. But I think it's in any area of your life, you say, well, where's God first, right? Is he first in my time? Is he first, in my prayer life? Am I giving him the first of my day, the best of my day? Am I giving him what's left over? In my time, what am I giving God? How does it line up? If you were to take your ledger, of course, we don't use checkbooks anymore hardly, but, years ago, if you would have ledgered your checkbook, and put all that stuff in there, where would God be, in that list? Where would he be? Tithing is an Old Testament thing. That's what Brent was saying. There's no New Testament examples of tithing. We have no biblical New Testament example to tithe. Tithing was off the top. It was off the very top. I had people that used to tithe, used to ask me, they said, well, is that net or gross? you know. well, in the Old Testament, it was gross. Let me tell you, it was right off the top. Yeah. And if you read, there's some passages there on tithing. There's really no sense in us getting really deep into that. But if you're to study that in the Old Testament, literally it was a tenth of everything that you had. When you ran your cattle under the rod, every 10th cow, every 10th lamb, every 10th goat, every 10th whatever, that went to the temple. So you lost a tenth of your herd if you were a farmer or a rancher, which most of them people were, or a shepherd. You lost a tenth of your herd every year to the church right off the top. And you could even get a pick which ones went under. So you could redeem them, but it cost you like a time and a half. You could redeem one. If you really didn't want to lose that one, you could redeem it. But you lost a tenth of your herd. That's a lot every year, isn't it? That's a pretty good tough. If you look at the New Testament, if you look at Luke, Jesus says, you tithe the mint and the dill and the cumin in your cupboard, right? You tithe your spices. That's how intense this was. You tithe the spices in your cabinet. He says you neglect the weightier matters of the law, justice and mercy. He says, but you should do the latter without, you should do the former without neglecting the latter. In other words, Jesus didn't condemn them for tithing their spices. Now that's pretty, you got to admit, that's pretty intense to have to go through your cupboards and tithe your spices. That's pretty serious business, right? And that's what tithing amounted to. Tithing was right off the top of everything. It was the very first. God always expected that, didn't he, in the Old Testament? He expected your firstborn. He expected the first of your flock. He expected the best of your flock. He expected the best. He expected the first. And he took his cut right off the top. That hasn't changed, right? That hasn't changed. God didn't change. Why did God want them to give like that? Why did he, you got to get to the root of the thing. Why did God want them to give? Absolutely. He wanted them to feel it. He wanted them to know that they were giving that to him. It was a sacrifice. He expected it to be a sacrifice. He didn't expect it to be easy. He didn't say, well, if you have a little left. He expected it to be tough. And it was, because he wanted them to feel it, absolutely. And the other thing is that we need to give. Why do we need to give to God? Why do we need to give? What does giving show? Shows obedience, shows love. What do you give to in your life? What do you give to, taking the church of God out of the mix, what do you give to in your life? Yeah, you give to your children. You give to the things that are important to you, don't you? You give to your kids. You might buy a car because you really want a car. You might buy a house. Maybe you spend it on hobbies. Maybe you spend it on leisure activities. Maybe you take vacations. You're spending it on things you love, because when we love stuff, we spend money on it. We spend time on it, right? My very first car was a 71 Ford Pinto. That ain't much of a car, but man, I spent every dime I had on that car. You know what I mean? Because I love that car. Little piece of junk that it was. But you spend it on that, so there's a deal involved in that. The church is not a business. I don't think I can say that loud enough. The church is not a business. It's not our job to make money off our money. It is not, in any respect. It is our job to use our money to further the gospel of Christ. That's what we do. That's our mission. I have issues, maybe it's just me, but I have issues with churches raising money by any other way than our example in the New Testament, which is by the free will giving of its members. Anything else to me is wrong. I just have issues on every level with it. We shouldn't rent things. We shouldn't rent houses. We shouldn't rent buildings. It's not our business. That's not who we are. And if we have to do that to support ourselves, then there's an issue, because we should be able to support ourselves by ourselves. And I don't think the church needs to be perceived as a business. I I I struggle with that, and and I've wrote some pretty heavy articles about that in my life. You know, the truth is that the church, the way people perceive the church, a lot of people I personally know, including my father, one reason I had such a hard time ever getting him to come in a church building was because he saw churches as money makers. He saw church as a way to make money. That's how people make money. And unfortunately, whenever you would get him into a church building as a kid, undoubtedly it would be a sermon on giving, or they would pass the plate 2 or 3 times. Where I used to go to church, that wasn't uncommon. Pass the plate 2 or 3 times. So, and it would aggravate him. Yeah, Gary. Oh, yeah, and unfortunately, you know, I think the business side of things it causes a lot of problems in the church. And not just, you might say, well, because people are like, well, where's the money going? Or where's my money going? Or maybe we're not spending the money where I think we ought to spend the money. But to me, the business side of things has sapped a lot of our energy and strength of our elderships in churches, because our elders wind up being business managers, and they worry about paying the light bill and paying preachers and paying insurance and paying, instead of worrying. And really in the Bible, that was never really that was never really an elder's job. Yeah, go ahead. Right. Yeah, there is a legal ramification. We are a nonprofit organization. So, you know, there are legal ramifications too of how we raise money. So, is money important for us? Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you're sitting in a building that was paid for by the donations of members here. You know, so yeah, absolutely it is. Do we need money to function as we function? Beyond a shadow of a doubt. No doubt about it. The question comes in to, you know, how we collect that money, and how we use that money, and then in biblically, you know, what we're authorized to do to collect money. So that's really where we start to talk about the issue. 1 Corinthians 16:2 is a horribly misused passage of the Bible. It says, it's where Paul's talking about collecting money to take back to Jerusalem, and to take back to Judea for the famine in Judea. And it's probably the most common scripture churches use on giving, because it says to do it every first day of the week. But if you really look carefully at the text, he says, on the first day of every week, each one of you is to put aside and save as he may prosper, so that no collections be made when I come. When I arrive, whomever you may approve, I will send them with letters to carry your gift to Jerusalem. Like Gary says, that's the only biblical example of corporate giving, of a group of Christians giving money whenever they meet to send somewhere, to do something with. That's our only corporate example. But unfortunately, it's weak, because the reason is because Paul basically is saying, you're only going to do this till I come, and then you're not going to do it anymore. I don't want you to do it when I'm there. And it's a specific purpose. In other words, you're doing it to send money to Judea. It's to send money to the saints in Jerusalem. So it's a specific giving. But he does say, like Brent said, lay by as you prospered every first day of the week. Churches love that because they can do it every first day of the week that way, right? Until I come. But also, like I said, using that as a biblical example for us to give, there is some example there, absolutely, but it's probably not the giving every first day of the week per se that you and I are engaged in that particular context, because it was a specific purpose. It was for a specific cause, to support the church in Jerusalem. But it is an example, and it also reinforces that when they met, first day of the week, so it's good for that. And it also reinforces that as you've prospered, in other words, he's not giving a certain amount as you prospered, to give as you prospered. So he's not giving a certain amount. Right, but like Gary says, most of those examples actually are individual. Yeah, I know, but most of that was still, it wasn't like the church. It was more like, if you really study all that, it's like they would come stay with you. Yeah. Yeah, it's like you can support them. Don't muzzle the ox while they're treading, that type of idea. But it was still, I think, like Gary says, it was more individualized giving. It was from individuals. It wasn't necessarily like the church was writing them a check or the assembly was writing them a check. I think certain people, maybe wealthy people, were supporting them in a congregation. So, go ahead, Gary. Right. Yeah, it's yeah, and I think that's something you see. You talk to elders anywhere, go to these elder meetings. That's one thing you see over and over and over is they're mired down in they're mired down in writing checks and paying bills and worried about all that stuff, to the point that it takes away from the stuff that the Bible really calls them to do, which is spiritual leadership. But yet we look to the elders, don't we, to make sure the lights are on and the insurance is paid and that stuff is done. But from a biblical standpoint, that really wasn't their initial thing. Do we have to give? Is it against the Scripture for us to give in a corporate way? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I mean, we give as we're prospered. We decide. It's individual. We do it. We decide what to do. So absolutely, there's nothing wrong with that. And maybe those churches did do that. But, you kind of get the idea that in the early church, certain wealthy people kind of pushed things through, supported things, but right. Absolutely. And I think that's something that, well, we'll talk about that in a minute. 2 Corinthians 9, 7, Paul, get my Bible to flip, there we go. Paul here is talking. He says, each one of you must do just as he has purposed in his heart, not grudgingly or under compulsion. For God loves a cheerful giver, and God is able to make all grace abound to you, so that always having sufficiency in everything, you may have abundance in every good deed. The idea here is purposed in our heart. I think that's a really big thing with giving. I think maybe we don't tell our kids that. I know as a child I was never told that, like I should have been told that. That's something that you start at a young age. You should purpose in your heart what you're going to give to the church. It should be something you decide, that you discuss with your spouse if you're married, that you should give cheerfully. God loves a cheerful giver. We shouldn't give under compulsion. We shouldn't give grudgingly. We should be cheerful in our giving, and we should give bountifully. So we should give as we've been prospered. And, I've been prospered a lot. Most of us in here have been prospered a lot. And it's been my experience over the years that we as a congregation probably don't give as much as we could. And I'll tell you the reason for that. It's not because we're stingy, and it's not because that we wouldn't give more. Because when there's really a need here and we see it, then we cover it. And the truth of it is, if the elders, I think, came in here next Sunday morning and stood up and said, listen, we're going to do 4 missionaries, it's going to cost this much money, I really believe we'd do that. I know I would help do that. I really believe we'd do that. I believe we'd step up and do it, because I think that's how this congregation is, and there's a lot of us in here that could help do that. But, a lot of giving is we see a need. With this building, boy, I remember when we built this building, boy, what a problem. I mean, what an issue. It was such a discussion, we can't pay for it, it's so much money. We're going to have all this years of debt. And, this thing got paid off in no time, practically. It got paid off in no time. Why? Because people saw the need. People knew we had to do it. People stepped up, and that's what we do. We step up if we're able. So, I think that's kind of how our minds work, our mindset is. Do we just give to the Lord just through the church? A lot of you don't. A lot of you give money to orphans' homes. A lot of you give money to other things that you think are worthy, that you desire to spend money on. Maybe you help people individually that desire help, that you can help individually in your life, that you give them money. So is all your giving to the Lord through the corporate, through the church? Maybe not. But I think predominantly it should be. And there's reasons I say that. And one of those reasons is, and I'm guilty of this, so don't take it that this is a 100% deal, because trust me, I'm really guilty of not always helping people through the church. But I think when we do that and we see somebody in need, and even if we give the money to the church and then let the church help them, it really helps the Lord more than if I just do it. Even if you go to the elders and say, well, there's somebody that really needs help, and I'm willing to give you the money if you'll write the check. You know what I mean? It helps the church. It makes the church look better. It makes us look like the church, like God's doing it, not just me or not just you. And the other thing is that we can do so much. I'm not involved much in the food bank anymore, but I did that for years and years. And I always told people, if you're going to spend $20 to the guy in the corner begging for food, $20 at the food bank will feed a family for a week. We have to be good stewards of the money. We only have so much money to give. Every one of us in here, we only have X amount of dollars to give. That's all we have, right? We're not unlimited. So we have to do it wisely. We have to be good stewards of the money that we have to give to God. And sometimes the best stewardship we can do is to do it through the church. Not only that, we have protection when we give it through the church. It's a lot easier for the elders when that person comes back to you and says, oh, I sure need help again. It's a lot easier to have elders between you and that person that can step in and counsel that person and say, listen, we really don't think we can help you right now. And it takes the monkey off your back because you're not the one having to sit there saying, oh, well, I just can't do that this time. And, you know, it helps you. And not only that, you have some wisdom. I promise you, there's very few people I know in the world that are as good at helping people that need help and benevolence as our elders. You know, Gary has taught me so much about dealing with people that need money and helping people that need money. And, you know, me and Gary often talk. We've got taken a lot. Gary's got taken a lot. He can give you some really good stories. But the truth is that I've learned a lot from him about vetting people and talking to people and sustainability. And Buck has even said, you know, listening to the elders talk to people has taught him a lot about, you know, how to deal with people that are in need or people that need money. So, you know, we have an avenue through the church to help people. Even if we're doing it individually, we can still go through the church. And sometimes that's really good to do it that way. It really works out better to do it that way than to try to do it yourself. So I think that's things that, you know, you should consider when you think about giving. Because like I said, we all only have so much money to give. One of my favorite passages on giving is in Philippians chapter 4, verse 17. Because Paul basically says that you've given to me and that you've supplied my needs and that God's going to repay you and that it's not my blessing, but you're the one that's going to receive the blessing for giving in Philippians 4. And I really like that passage when you talk about giving. He says, not that I seek the gift itself, but I seek the gift for the profit which increases to your account. But I have received everything in full and have an abundance. I am amply supplied, having received from Epaphroditus what you have sent. And that's a corporate give, you know, as Brent was talking about. That's where people in Philippians took up money to send to Paul, to help Paul, something that they decided to do as a group. So that's another good corporate example of giving, sending that money to Paul. And Paul talks several times about people supporting him, helping him, giving him money. So I think that's good. But, you know, there's very few things that get under people's skin like money. Is that right? I mean, that's one thing that's going to get under somebody's skin quicker than anything else is your money. Do you agree with that? And when people walk into our building and they walk into this congregation, I think that's one thing that you can say is that they don't leave here feeling like we asked them for anything, for money, right? I think that's true. You know, that's something that we don't do. I think the biblical example of giving is for people to give cheerfully as you've purposed in your heart and to give that money as you've been prospered. And I think the church should be fully supported by that method. I don't think there should be any other means of support of a congregation but that method. And I think if we can't survive that way, then we'll just have to cut somewhere, I guess. But I just think that's how we should be. The church, I don't think, should ever be perceived as a business or as in the business of making money. I'll be more specific about that. Should never be perceived as in the business of making money. We're good here. We do good. People give here. But I'm going to tell you, this is the truth, because I was raised Baptist. And I'm going to tell you, in a congregation our size, of course, they talk about giving a lot, and they pass the plate a lot, and they used to make us sign things of how much we was going to give every Sunday for the year and budget it in. But I'm telling you, a congregation our size, a Baptist congregation our size, in my experience, would probably give about a third more on a Sunday morning than we do here. But now they work at it. But that's just the truth in my experience. I've looked at that several times, our congregation size, and looked at other churches, denominations, this congregation size, and that's kind of the truth. And that's because they push it, and we don't. But if we had to, we would. Make no mistake. If we had to do it, if we needed it, then we would do it, right? Elders, you want to add anything to this conversation? No, I don't think so either. And you know, as we've been prospered, is kind of throws that in there because some people get paid once a month. Some people get paid twice a month. You know, farmers or ranchers, they might get a pretty good check one month of the year or one time of the year. So, you know, that's going to vary with people, with what you're doing, you know, and how it's going. So I totally agree with you. You know, I think on the overall, that's what we have to do. I hate passing a plate on Sunday morning. I mean, I know that's convenient, but I loved it when we just had the basket at the back. Yeah. Right. Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think, you know, I totally think our members should support us, and you know, I don't think we should ever put pressure on anybody else in any way to have to give. So anyway, are there any comments about this? Pretty straightforward, really. What? Hmm. Yeah. Go ahead, Bill. What was you going to say? Oh. Yeah, and we're good about that here. I mean, they keep enough reserve that we have too. I mean, we spent $20,000, $30,000 on air conditioners this year, so stuff like that happens. I mean, we have to have some to cover. Like Clyde says, there's a business side to it, But I think the business side and the spiritual side, we don't need to mix that up. And the church, when the world looks at us, they should never look at us and say, oh, they just do that to make money, or they're just making money. They should never look at us that way. That should never be the perception the world has of us. So, I think that's kind of where I stand on that. Oh boy, it's going to get fun. We got 2 minutes left. I'm going to be gone next Wednesday night, so I'm not starting this till I get back. So, on the what? Well, it is a good guideline. I mean, I think the inherent problem with 10% is that 10%, for Bill Gates to give 10% would be an unbelievable amount of money. But Bill Gates would never miss it. For a person that's on a fixed income, on a Social Security check, that's not having a hard time making their bills, to say give 10%, that's like the widow's mite. I mean, they're giving everything they have. And I think that's how come Jesus says, give as you prosper. Because, the truth is, we should give till we know it. We should feel it when we give every week. We should feel that.
I guess the way I look at the 10th is that was a very good guide mark for them back then, and they all felt it. And we should purpose, like you said, a reasonable amount for our income that you do feel a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
That's my personal.
I think for most people, I don't know how most people look at it, but I think 10% is, it depends on how you look at it. But I'm like Brent, I think you're probably going to come up on the short end. I mean, you're probably going to say I'm going to give more than that. But what was you going to say, Gary? It was unbelievable. Temple tax. Yeah. Yeah, that was the start. Right, you need to be happy about it. Yeah, yeah. Judaism under the law was very tough. I mean, it was tough on every level, not just on giving. It was tough on time. It was hard. When Jesus says he set them free, he really did set them free from a lot of burden. Not just financially, but time and sacrifice. I mean, everything else. Look at just the price of what sacrifices would have cost. Would have been tremendous. That's how come he give lower sacrifices for people that didn't have money, like doves and stuff. But, you take somebody that had a means. I mean, you was literally buying a cow, whatever, to sacrifice on the altar. That was a pretty pricey deal just to do that. So, we have it pretty easy. Honestly, compared to what the Jews had, we have a pretty easy go. So, yeah, that's right. Yeah. I don't know. I think you just need to lay out what you spend on stuff during the month and or that's what I try to kind of do. Just lay out what you spend on stuff during the month and then say, where does my giving fall in the middle of that mix, I mean, if I'm spending more money going to the movies than I'm giving to the church, that's probably not a good thing, I would think, right? I mean, I think to me, that's how I always kind of looked at it. And it always made me give more because every time I do of it, I'm thinking, oh man, I'm giving, the church is worth more than a car payment to me, you know. So anyway, you got to figure that out for yourself, I'm afraid. I can't help you with that one. Thanks for your time.